Hi everybody, I'm Don Dickson and I want to thank you for joining me again today for a continuation of our study, our current study on detail, mapping, and interpretation of structure. As I pointed out over the last couple of weeks, this is really the area where all fishermen need to strive to get better. To not only make an attempt, but to get good at it. Because in the end, it's going to make all the difference between you catching fish and not catching fish. It's the real answer for the bulk of the season and even in the early season and late fall. You have to interpret seasonal movements and so on and so forth. So we've had all of those discussions, but now we have been zeroing in. We've been zeroing in over the last couple of weeks on the detail mapping of structure once you're out on the lake. I think we've pointed out for the most part that your contour maps, whether it be electronic or paper maps, even though they're a great help in locating the areas of a lake or a reservoir where we need to be concentrating some of our efforts, they still won't give us the detail, the absolute detail, which will allow us to interpret the exact spots in deep water and allow us to pinpoint areas to fish. Now, the whole purpose of this study on detail mapping and interpretation is brought about by the fact that contour maps, whether it be electronic or whether it be the paper maps, they won't give us the detail that we need to interpret a structure and subsequently then be able to fish it properly. We have to have all of the details. And the maps just don't give us the details. But the maps are a great help. We've pointed that out. They put us in an area. They identify an area where we have structure. Then it's up to you and I to go and develop a decent detailed map of that structure so we can interpret where the fish are going to be and how you and I can best present lures in order to catch them. Now, Buck used to say, our whole job on the water, our entire job, is to put ourselves in the best place where we have the best chance to catch a fish. Now, we also pointed out in our general interpretation in that study, in our knowledge of basic movements and weather and water conditions and seasonal movements and species of fish and the differences that are involved, we pretty much have made a point in our overall study of all of these things. There's a lot involved. But in the end, if you ask me, well, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to get to a spot in our fishing where we can put our lures in the spot or in the place where we have the best chance of catching a fish. That's what it's all about. This entire study on general mapping and interpretation, considering all of the lake types, the structured types, the seasonal movements, the different species, weather and water conditions, time of the year, all of those things. Then we get out on the lake and we talk about the detail mapping, which we've been covering over the last 2 weeks. What is all of that all about? Well, we know that most all that water out there has no fish in it most of the time. It's just a basic fact. It's a fact of life. It's a fishing fact. 95% of all the water has no fish in it most all the time. So we have to take all of this information and all of the physical skills that are involved to get to a point. The goal here is getting to a point where we're placing our lures in an area or a place where we have the best chance of catching a fish. That's what it's all about. And we pointed out at least 25 times by now, I guess, that these contour maps or the navionics, all the latest electronic to contour maps that are available, they won't give us the details that we need. We have to create that ourselves. We have to investigate. And we've come up with a procedure, a mechanical procedure, to get that detail map. And once we have that detail map of any structure, we're able to interpret it and then subsequently able to fish it properly. And in the end, what that means is we're putting our lure in the best chance where we have to catch a fish, period. That's what it's all about. as you remember our study on structure types, the natural structures that we have are bars, humps, and saddles. We have ridges, we have reefs, we have some other things, but overall your most common structures, the natural structures, are bars, humps, and saddles. Now we've come up with a procedure, mechanical procedure, of how to map a bar. Then we showed how to map a hump, and the last time we got together we talked about mapping a saddle. So we've pretty much covered that. So what does that leave? Well, it leaves all of the man-made structure that we have in our reservoirs. Now, in reservoirs, you know, we do have bars, humps, and saddles, but we also have man-made stuff. And the man-made stuff is some of my favorite structures because A, they're productive, B, they're easy to find, easy to locate, and C, they're normally always clean areas where you can work the bottom and without getting hung up, you know, every 2 minutes. And in reservoirs, to me, that's an important thing. I want to keep my lure down there working. I don't want to be spending 3/4 of my day trying to get unhooked of a hang. I want to be working clean areas if I can locate them. So, as we get down to the area of the man-made stuff in reservoirs, and then we try to pull in this question, well, how am I going to map and interpret man-made stuff versus how we map the natural stuff? Well, I've got some news for you, some good news. It's really pretty easy. So how are we going to get a detailed map of dams and causeways? I'm going to tell you. We don't need 4 years of college and 2 years of graduate school to be able to recognize a causeway or recognize the dam in a reservoir. These structures are above water. You can see them. You can easily identify them on a map. And if you know how productive these areas can be, that should be the first 2 places you're looking in a reservoir. When you go fish a reservoir, take a look at the dam and any mid-lake causeways. And reason I say mid-lake, let's say, for instance, we have a causeway that crosses a certain reservoir, but it's way up near the headwaters. And it's so far up that the channel up there is about 11 feet deep. And it's breaking off into that 11 feet at 3 feet. Well, obviously, I'm not interested in that causeway. That's not going to be a productive year-round or summertime structure. You may take a look at it from a seasonal standpoint, real early season, something like that. But bottom line is, when I'm looking at a reservoir and I'm looking at my summertime fishing, bulk of the season, I want that causeway that I'm locating to be somewhere middle of the lake, or maybe a little bit further up towards the headwaters, but not too far. I want to still have plenty of depth and so on and so forth. So these are 2 very important structures to fish. But the good news is, I don't have to have a contour map to locate them. All I got to do is look. You can pull up a road map and locate those 2 structures. Now, one of the things that we have to ask on any structure is, does it lead all the way? Well, in the case of a causeway, in the case of a dam, we know it leads all the way to the channel. In the case of the dam, channel goes smack dab up to the dam, and that's all the deepest water in the lake is right there at the dam. So we know it leads from the shallows, it's out of water, and it leads all the way to the deep. A causeway, mid-lake causeway, as long as it's going across the lake and crosses the main river channel somewhere. When that lake was flooded, wherever that river channel was flowing, this causeway crossed that lake, what's now a lake. It crossed that old river, and there was a bridge. And where that bridge was is where that channel goes through. So if you have rocky riprap, the stones and rocks on a causeway, you know that that river channel goes underneath that causeway somewhere. So we know, here again, it leads all the way. It leads from the shallows to the deep. And not only that, just like with the dam and a causeway, not only leads to the deep, but it leads to the deepest water. It leads to the channel, which is the deepest water in the reservoir. certainly, even if it's halfway up the reservoir. It's the deepest water in the area. It's the channel. There's nothing any deeper than the channel. So we know it leads all the way. And the rest is really pretty easy. We don't have to go through all the steps like we do on a hump, crisscross passes and identifying multiple break lines and all of that. For the most part, we already know where the contact point is. The fish are living in the channel. They hit that causeway. They hit that dam at one spot. And we know where that is. First thing they see when they leave the channel. Pretty easy. We don't need to do a lot of elaborate work. So when it all comes down, I said, all of this mapping and interpretation is just to develop the ability to get a lure to a spot where you have the best chance of catching a fish. You look at a dam and a causeway. It's pretty simple how we fish them. It's not a mystery. Pretty easy how we do it. Now, a couple of things we need to talk about. We're just not going to fish the causeway right in immediate access to where the channel is. We're not going to fish the dam right where the river channel comes in at the end of that spot where it hits the dam and where it enters into and goes through the tailways. We're not going to just hit that one spot. We're going to fish the whole thing, and here's why. When fish move on these structures, that we know they're going to be living in the channel, they hit the structure at a certain spot, but they could move along that for long distances. So they might be 10 yards from the channel. They might be 50 yards from the channel. There might be a bunch of fish 100 yards from the channel along that rocky riprap. So we need to fish it all. This is trolling water personified. That's why trolling is so important when fishing these structures. And I'm going to be talking more about that at a later time and showing some film and different things we're going to be doing. But as we look at a dam, let's take a dam first. That area, when they flooded, before they flooded the reservoir, they cleaned that area out where they built that dam. And we have this rocky riprap along the dam that runs for a distance. It runs for as long as that face of that dam is. And as you look at the side view, sometimes it'll just be sort of just going right on down and finally where the rocks end. That's how deep we're going to fish it. We're going to stack lures all the way down. In some cases, and I have a picture here, I did a video once on this reservoir out in Mississippi where they pull it down about 30 feet in the fall. And a lot of the structure that's normally underwater was out of water. And if you haven't seen that on my YouTube channel, you should go look it up. It's pretty interesting stuff. You can actually see what a structure really looks like because we're looking at it and it's normally underneath the water. But I've got a shot of this riprap out there that we were fishing on Grenada. And here's a shot under this low water period where you're coming down that rocky riprap, and in that one little spot right there where I have that arrow point, you can see there's a little break line. Now, as you're looking and fishing these areas, it's not just stacking lures straight on down and just, you know, sort of contouring down that wall of that dam. Anytime we come to a break line we can identify, we're going to concentrate on that, for sure. Even if it's at 10 feet, or if it's 12 feet, or 17 feet, whatever it is. If we can establish and actually see a true break line along the face of that dam, we're going to obviously pinpoint our fishing right there. But in a lot of the dams, it's pretty much you're just stacking lures till you go all the way down to where there are no more rocks, and then you've checked it. And I never will just go for a piece of that dam. I'm going to troll the whole thing, and I'll tell you why. A lot of times, I don't know how many times I've run into this, at least a couple of dozen times, that where I started catching a lot of fish nearly at the end, almost as far away from the main river channel as you can get, and sometimes that puzzled me. I got to thinking, well, it could be a seasonal thing, but if it's the middle of summer, what are those fish doing way down here when the channel's way over there? And in every case, when I did some very careful scrutiny, I found that a mile or so up the lake before we got to the dam or a half a mile, or in some cases 2 miles, the old river channel sort of split. And the main part went down where you can identify it. But this split part goes over and hits that dam at another spot. Now, the break lines that were created by this little split channel that goes down and hits that, it feeds fish up to that area of the riprap. So in many cases, you're trolling a dam, and you start at the channel, and you start stacking your lures, starting in the shallows and moving down. I can't tell you how many thousands of bass I've caught on a 500 spoon plug trolling 2 feet of water along the face of a dam. Can't tell you how many. And many times the smaller fish that you're going to catch there, for the most part, they're going to identify a hot spot. Somewhere there's a hot spot along that dam. And in some cases there's 2 or 3 hot spots along a dam. I want to identify all of them. And then in my early days with buck, I always wanted to know why. If I caught a fish a certain place where I didn't think he should be, I wouldn't leave until I found out why. I had to answer it in my mind. Why is that fish there? How did it get there? Or in many cases, I catch 4 or 5 fish in one spot where they shouldn't be, theoretically, shouldn't be. And every time when I investigated, I found that little split, another little stream side, something, or a split channel came down, created some break lines that fed some fish up to that area of the riprap. I'll give you a great example. One of the first promotions I ever did was Berlin Reservoir in Ohio, just across the Pennsylvania line. And it had a causeway. I forget the route number. At the time, I had a van with a bed built in the back. I slept on top of the causeway, a little pull-off. And in the morning, launched my boat right there, started down that causeway, and immediately was into 4.5-pound bass, promoted almost the entire eastern state of Ohio on one causeway at Berlin Reservoir. Now, the funny part was, where that main river channel went underneath the causeway, I never caught any fish right there. What you know is the contact point, or you think you know. For the fish that are using that structure, coming out of there, hitting it right there, I think maybe there's a couple times I caught a little short, nothing. But every time I get about 2/3 of the way down that causeway, every time I fish it, I was into big adult bass, 4.5, 5-pound fish. Fishing that reservoir, I don't know how many times. I took riders from Cleveland. I took riders from all around. And in Youngstown, I took a big tackle wholesaler out there, and halfway 2/3 down that causeway, there's all my fish. Again and again and again and again and again. And of course, that really bothered me because I didn't know why those fish were always in that spot. I couldn't identify any little sharper break. No, I couldn't see any reason for it. And finally, after about 2 months, I was in a little tackle shop in a wee little town not too far from Youngstown. Stopped in to pick something up. I forget what it was. And this guy had a contour map. So I bought that from him. And I looked up that area where the causeway was. About a half a mile removed from the causeway, that old river channel turned out and then came down and went under the deal. But before it made that turn, it split. And there was just a little, looked like a very little side stream went up and ran into that causeway, right about the spot where I was catching all my fish. So as I came out, once I found that, I came out from that causeway and turned and made some sideways passes, going east and west, parallel to the reservoir, but looking for that little stream. And you know what I found? It didn't break but about 2 feet. And it wasn't very wide. Wide as a couple cars maybe, that was it. But that's what was feeding those fish. From the channel out here, up that little cut, hitting that causeway right there, which made no sense to me until I saw that map. I never thought to look for a break line of a stream because my channel was over here, was clean over on the other side. Never thought to even look at it. Of course, it was early in my career. Since I've run into that now many times, I look for it. And now we have some sophisticated contour maps. Every time I look at a causeway or a dam, I will look to see if there was any split in the channel where it's actually making contact with that rocky riprap in two different places. Even if it's not, many times I will find the fish congregated quite a distance from the main river channel. They hit it from the main river channel, but they move along that rocky riprap. Putting it mildly, fish love dams and causeways. Bass love rocky riprap. They love it, and so do I. And if you ever needed a reason to start trolling some spoon plugs, man, you can't find anything that'll do the job like a spoon plug on a causeway or a dam. If we got to stack down, clean down to the deepest depths, we've got a lure that will do that and allow us to check every depth on the troll. And of course, once you hit more than one fish in one spot, then you're going to the cast. So that comes under the heading of presentation of lures and so on and so forth. But today all I wanted to do was mention about what we do to detail map a dam or a causeway. Not much. We already have all of the key answers that we need. We know it goes down like that. We're going to fish it all. We know it leads all the way. We know it leads to the deepest water. It leads from the shallows because it's out of the water. We've got pretty much all our answers. All we got to do is look at a road map and find out where the causeway and the dam is and then go to fishing. That's it. We don't have to have a 30-minute vlog either on how to do it. This is a short little talk today that allow you to get to these structures without worrying about doing all of that detail work that we're doing in some of the other examples. But these structures are fantastic. And they're my favorite structures in a reservoir. Either or, equally as good. Now, the next thing we need to talk about, and I'm going to spend a little more time the next time we get together and talk about underwater roadbeds and underwater railroad grades, and I'm going to show some examples of those. Again, they're not hard to map. We don't need to go through some of the elaborate things that we do on the natural stuff. They're pretty cut and dry. You know, Buck used to say, roadbed, one of my favorite structures, because you know it leads all the way. Well, same with a dam and a causeway. It leads all the way. Easy structures to fish. Easy structures to map. We don't have to do much mapping. We just have to start fishing pretty much. And the fish will give you all those hot spots. The fish will show themselves. They always do. So today, we just touched on the first two. Next time we get together, we'll talk about underwater roadbeds and railroad grades. I'm going to show you some pictures on the map. And just so you can identify these areas, because they're such wonderful areas to fish when you're fishing a reservoir. So at any rate, till the next time we talk, thanks for being with me today. Be sure to check us out on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I appreciate you being here, and we'll see you the next time.